Welcome, everybody, to this edition of the Mary Trump Show. I am honored to be joined tonight by the great Charlie Pierce, lead political blogger at Esquire, author of the very prescient book, as it turns out, Idiot America, among many other things. Welcome, Charlie, and thank you so much for being here tonight.
Well, it's good to be here, Mary. How are you?
Well, it's been a rough week.
Yeah, no kidding.
We found out yesterday that the irreplaceable Eric Boehlert died on Monday night. And you wrote a really beautiful piece for Esquire called Eric Boehlert's spirit was decades younger and his wisdom decades older. I'd like to read a paragraph if you don't mind.
Read my stuff back to me? Absolutely. Okay. I'm there for that.
Eric was gloriously unimpressed by reputations. He was the implacable foe of journalistic laziness in all its forms, especially as expressed through access journalism and the reportorial arch heresy of both siderism. Take him all in all, he was something of a proud throwback to what the craft of journalism ought to be. Every word of that rings absolutely true. And you also call him one of the only media critics who mattered, with which I completely concur. So in addition to talking about Eric, who was just a wonderful, lovely man, in addition to being a phenomenal journalist of impeccable integrity, I also want to talk about why his work was so necessary, and of course continues to be, although I honestly can't think of who's going to fill the void. His absolute willingness to go right at his targets, pulling no punches, and about the state of journalism in general. Again, one of the reasons I want to talk to you, of course, is because Eric was your friend, but because you're in that same vein of journalists. So, your focus is different. But
yeah, I'm flattered that you put me in the same rank with Eric. I'm a refugee from the mainstream media. I worked in, I guess I still am. I mean, Esquire is not exactly an underground publication, although I started in the alternative media.
Right.
At the Boston Phoenix in the 1970s.
I remember it well. I used to read it every week.
Yep. You used to get it for free.
That's right.
Anyway, so I think what he did that was quite remarkable was that he was relentless. But I don't think Eric was ever mean. I can't remember him writing. I mean, it cannot be said about me, but I don't think Eric ever wrote a mean sentence in his life. He just read very well, and read with a real jeweler's eye for nonsense, and never got on. And once he got his teeth into something, he never let go.
Yeah, and that is unfortunately increasingly, I don't want to say rare exactly, but infrequent, shall we say?
Yeah.
And I think my first introduction to him was when he was doing MSNBC hits on AM Joy Reid's morning show on MSNBC. And then, he branched out. He became, I don't know which happened first, but he became a regular on the Stephanie Miller show, where you also are, along with your buddy, Jody Hamilton, who's awesome.
Oh, America's fun couple.
That's right.
I think outside of Bob Cesca, I think Eric has been on Stephanie's show longer than anybody else. So I think he was doing Stephanie before he was doing AM Joy.
Oh, wow. Okay. That's incredible. Because that was a while ago. It's I don't remember exactly how long, but years for sure. And then he made the very interesting choice to start Press Run, which is a newsletter on Substack. And when you only know somebody from media appearances, you feel like you know them, even though of course you don't. And you also understand that for a lot of people, how they are on TV isn't necessarily how they are in real life. And then he started press run, and that gave us a new insight into him. He showed a different side of himself. Like you, I did not know that he was a music critic way back.
And a you know a very good one. I mean, the guy won awards for his music criticism.
Yeah,
And you know, I didn't know that. I just certainly didn't know he worked for Billboard.
I had no idea. And
Yeah.
and there are two things, well, three things really. The first thing about his newsletter is that every single one he started with "Stay healthy, be kind."
Right.
And he was a genuinely kind person. And then he also had a good things segment, which I'm very proud to say I showed up in once. It was like the highlight of my year. I had written an article for the New Republican. Eric referenced it in the good stuff section. But at the very end, he shared a track of music that was new to him or he was revisiting. And like one of the very first times I spoke with him, it was about that. I'm like, you realize like half of my current playlist is music I got off of your blog.
I know he's I mean his tastes were wide and varied and generally very, very good.
Yes.
You know, he certainly turned me on to artists I'd never heard of.
Yeah, me too.
And yeah, I mean he had a great catholicity of interests. And you know, and as you said, I mean, basically he was one of the nicest people who ever lived. I mean, he just was, and judging by the reaction that various papers have gotten from his neighbors, apparently he was like the Squire of Montclair.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah. Everybody knew him. He played softball and basketball in the town leagues. He was a, God help us, a familiar figure on his bike and on his, and running. He was living this wonderful suburban life while still sitting in his office and, excuse me, administering the proper correctives once a day.
Yeah.
For what's going on. His last piece was about why the media, why a lot of the elite political media seems to be wanting Joe Biden to fail. And as far as I know, he's the only one writing that. Which is plainly obvious, by the way.
Yes, it is. And one of the great things, in addition to the fact that he never hit below the belt, he was a straight shooter, and that gave his arguments even more force, I think.
Sure.
In addition to that, though, his work was painstaking. And one of the reasons we're in the situation we're in is because so many, and I'm not going to lay it all at the feet of reporters and journalists. There are editors they answer to. There are editors who let lazy reporting go through without any checks.
And there are readers who do not read well and do not think. I mean, let's not let the readers let the consumers off the hook either.
Absolutely not. In fact, recently, I think it was Elie Mystal talking about Joe Rogan. He's like, Joe Rogan didn't create these millions of people who listen to him. They went looking for Joe Rogan.
Yep.
So
and he's right.
Yeah, and I think that is true. And I think one of the issues, though, is that a lot of people don't understand that reporters, journalists don't write their own headlines.
Oh man,
I don't understand. By the way,
I spent 1983, almost 20 years as a sports writer. You haven't lived until you've stood in front of an outraged outfielder in a clubhouse explaining to him that you don't write your own headlines. Nobody believes that. Nobody out there nobody who is written about believes that you don't write your own headlines. It was one of the worst experience. The worst parts of being a daily sports writer was having to explain that over and over again.
But it is true.
Yeah, because some smart ass on the desk has decided that to make a funny joke, and you got to pay for it the next day.
But it's also it is a craft,
Yes.
so to speak. I mean, there is a craft to it. But not to be too cynical, it also seems like it's gone from drawing people into the heart of the story to drawing people into something that the story's not really about for the sake of clicks.
Yeah, I mean, I think the arrival of the internet has been both a blessing and a curse. I mean, it's a blessing for me because it's how I make my living now.
Right.
But it's also, it's done, obviously the internet has done incredible damage to newspapers, just because of the complete evaporation of classified ads, just to name one factor. The sudden interest by hedge funds and fiscal pirates in local newspapers, because they can turn they can strip them bare and turn them and sell off the the parts for a good profit, has done nobody any good.
Right.
And I think basically the consolidation has been terrible. It's just been awful for everything, including especially the consumers.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're so siloed, and I think that's deliberate strategy on the part of media corporations.
Mm-hmm.
But it's also, as you said, part of the problem of the consumer. You just don't want to be challenged. You don't want to face. I think part of it is people don't like being wrong, or people don't like having their strongly held views challenged. But when there's no agreement about what facts are, and when there's one reality, like, it drives me crazy when people say there are two realities. There are not. There's one reality. Most of us choose to live in it, but a lot of us choose not to.
Yeah, I mean, I've always said, if I speak to classes, that the worst thing you can believe as a journalist in any field, but especially in political journalism, is the axiom that perception is reality.
Yep.
No, perception is perception.
Right.
And if the perception doesn't match the reality, it's your job as a journalist to hammer the reality until the perception conforms to it, not to declare the perception reality.
Mm-hmm.
I want to have a beer with the guy, or your uncle being a brilliant businessman, or name any one of a half a dozen other examples.
Mm-hmm.
No, you're not. Your job is to be the anchor in reality. Your job is the one that keeps the balloon from floating out the window and off into space, basically. And if that makes you unpopular, that's the way it goes. Nobody gets it. It used to be a point of pride that nobody, there were a couple of things. Number one, nobody went into this business to get rich. Mm-hmm. And number two, nobody went into this business to be popular.
Right.
That those were secondary considerations. And, the whole clickbait thing that you mentioned before is an attempt to become popular, to make a goal out of being popular. And I think that's destructive as hell. I really do.
Yeah, because again, it contributes to pretending that perception is reality. It caters to people's preconceived notions and prejudices. And then, of course, there's the idea that facts are can be something you believe in or not.
Right. Fact, I mean, in the book you were kind enough to mention, I said there were three basic premises of Idiot America, and the third one was facts are measured by how many people believe it, and their truth is measured by how fervently those people believe in it. And that's not true.
No.
But and it's no way for a democracy to run, and it's no way for media to run.
Right. I mean,
I have got, this is really embarrassing. I have got to go to my kitchen and turn off my dinner lest it burn. I sort of mistimed it. So hang in there. I'll be back. I'm sorry. This is live television, people.
I don't want your house to burn down. So please.
All right, hang on. You know what? I'll carry my laptop with me.
So we're going to get a tour.
Yeah, you get to see me limp
of the Pierce domain.
This is Cinema Verite. This is what NPR does. Only they win Peabody's for it. Hang on, we're passing our way
I feel like we're opening Al Capone's vault.
into my lovely kitchen. I just need to turn the stove off. All right, you guys, you sit there for a minute.
Okay.
Okay. Now the stove is off.
You're seeing it here first, guys.
There we go. We can keep talking if you'd like.
Hey, whatever works for you. By the way, speaking of walking,
my picture of Richard Nixon and Elvis. I don't know if you can see that.
that's
One of the great photos of all time.
It is indeed. It is
Anyway,
incongruous.
so we're moving back to the old Zoom call chair here. Now we've settled back in, and we can resume our intellectual discussion of whatever hell we were talking about. I started smelling smoke, and I thought, this is going to, you talk about clickbait. Hey, look, Mary's guest burned his house down. Anyway, so there
on
we
the
are.
show live. Well,
Yeah.
I'm thankful that didn't happen.
Me too.
You've had enough accidents. I know that
Oh,
you were
God.
terrible, or you were hit by a car.
I tore my patella tendon, and then I had my gallbladder removed, and then I got hit by a car. And most recently, I tore my quadriceps tendon in the other leg. So that's my 6 years of living hell.
I don't think you should get out of that chair.
I should never leave this chair. Absolutely. I've not been injured in this chair yet. But anyway.
Yeah, we were talking about perception, reality, belief, facts. And it's really quite simple. I don't think climate change gives a shit if you believe in it or not. Or COVID, for that matter.
Don't care. The oceans don't care who wins the debate over climate change. You're still going to be fleeing the Florida Keys.
That's right.
You know, there are still countries in the South Pacific disappearing. You know, this is, I mean, I hate to say it's not a political issue because it clearly is.
Yeah.
But the end result is not, going to be subject to debate. It's going to happen. The Colorado River is really drying up. So is the Rio Grande. And if, you know, if the Colorado River dries up, then you've got the Gobi Desert from Nebraska to California,
right?
Because people aren't supposed to live there, and the only reason they live there is because of the water that we stole. I mean, you're coming to the point now where you're going to have wars over water.
Oh, absolutely. That is the next. That is going to be the next global crisis.
Buying it up now. You've got major corporations buying up water supplies. As you have a lovely sip of your own there.
Yeah, I don't have a lifetime supply.
Don't drink it too fast because we're running out.
I drink it very slowly, but I live in New York, so I drink from the tap. So far so good. But the thing is, Charlie, these aren't the only reason these issues are political is because they're made political. There's nothing political about whether or not the Rio Grande is drying up, except insofar, and it is entirely the Republican Party, brings things like climate change into its fold of culture wars, which is completely crazy making.
Yeah, I mean, it's not. I mean, the same dynamic worked with COVID measures. You know, I grew up. I mean, I remember how happy I was, or how happy my mother had the pneumatic form of polio. She was in an iron lung for a year back during the epidemic days. And I remember how happy she was I remember the Salk vaccine.
Yep.
No, I remember what a absolute breakthrough it was. And then I remember the Sabin vaccine, which every school kid loved because it meant you didn't have to take shots anymore. You ate the sugar cube.
Yep.
And everybody, that was a proud, Jonas Salk didn't even patent it. He gave it to the world.
Right.
The United States helped eradicate smallpox. Smallpox is gone.
Right.
We were proud of that. Now we're going to fight over, whether you should vaccinate yourself against, a pandemic that's killed, going on 1 million people. What's wrong with us? I mean, you can't make everything an argument. Okay. Everything is not subject to if we're going to have a childish political culture, which we have, you can't keep putting important stuff in there
Right.
because bad things will happen. You know, you got to have a general agreement that, and I don't know how we get back to this, by the way, that science is by and large good. And that when scientists tell us something's going to happen, or something is on the way to happen, or that something might happen, or that they can cure a disease, we should probably believe them and not believe, our state senator who's, eating horse paste on, her Ritz crackers in her trailer home. I mean, that is not something we should do.
No, but it's not simply that one party decided to go down that road, and we'll get to why in a second. It's because these things are treated equally in the media, and journalists like you and Eric and others understand that journalists should be neutral as to the facts and pro-democracy. You are not being neutral as to the facts if you give equal time unchallenged to somebody who's anti-vaccine for COVID.
I agree. I mean, there aren't two sides to every issue. Sometimes there's only one side. Sometimes there are 15 sides. But the issues that are binary are very, very rare, especially as life and society and everything gets more complex. And if I see a guy, and this is my own standard, if I see a guy walking down the street with a duck on his head, I see it myself.
Mm-hmm.
I can write that. Okay. I don't have to get somebody else to tell me that they saw a guy walking down the street with a duck on his head. And I sure as hell don't need to have a guy say he saw a duck walking down the street with a guy on his ass. I mean, I can write what I observe, and I can interpret what I observe through I'll say skills, although it sounds like very braggadocious. I can interpret what I see through the skills I've developed over 40 years in this business. I think that makes me a reliable witness. I don't think I need anyone else to validate me. And I certainly don't need to hear the other side of the argument.
Right.
I don't need to hear the other side of the argument that the climate crisis is not a crisis. That's just stupid. And it's getting people killed. I don't need to hear the other side of the argument that, people who broke in and desecrated the United States Capitol had a point. No, they didn't. They didn't have a point. There's no point out there that was worth doing what they did.
Or if they did have a point, they're treasonous and should be punished accordingly, or traitors.
I agree.
Depending on your definition.
But the point is, there's no reason to believe there's a binary debate on that.
Exactly.
There's side A and side B. No, there's side A and criminals.
Yeah, and quite honestly, the number of things about which there can be rational argument between two sides is shrinking, because one party, the Republican Party, has become a party free of policy. So, for example, I don't think it's arguable whether sex education should be taught in schools. Of course it should. What you can potentially argue about is when, right?
That's
but
fair.
They don't even bother with that. They simply focus on whatever is going to keep their base as heated up and angry as possible.
Yeah.
And given the fact, it seems like in some ways a weird strategy, given the fact that, the Republican electorate is shrinking, all things being equal.
Well, if they, we get a few more like horse pace enthusiasts, and they'll shrink even faster. But no, I think, and I can't remember who wrote this, but I thought it was a brilliant insight. And the first campaign I ever covered, and this was back in the Boston Phoenix, was the Republican campaign in 1980. I covered the primaries with Bush and Reagan, with Daddy Bush and Reagan and John Anderson, and then I covered the Reagan campaign. And they gave me all kinds of access because they really wanted the Phoenix demographic. They really wanted, the young readers we had. So I got my phone calls returned. It was a terrific experience. But at that time, They got elected on the theory of supply side economics. If you cut taxes, you'll raise revenues. This is stupid. This is self-evidently stupid. If you cut the revenue coming in, you will not make more revenue. That isn't going to happen. Every economist in the world believed that wasn't going to happen. But that was, to me anyway, the very first time the Republican Party married itself to a fact-free belief. And once they did that, it became very easy to maintain fact-free beliefs in so much other stuff. In whatever when they also simultaneously, by the way, married themselves to the politicized evangelical church.
Yes.
Which brought a whole, new level of irrationality into the mix. And they just became, because they started winning elections with it, they just became acclimated to it, to the point now where, as I say in the blog a lot, they've contracted this prion disease. They've eaten so much of the monkey brains that they've got this terrible brain disease that's eating away their higher functions. They all know that, critical race theory isn't taught in third grade. Everybody knows that. Ted Cruz didn't breeze through Harvard on a football scholarship. He got in there because of his brains. He knows that.
Sorry, that's a weird image.
Well, yeah, I understand. But, Ted Cruz in any analogy is just kind of throws off the balance of nature. But they have believed in so much that isn't true for so very long that now they'll believe anything. We'll build a wall and Mexico will pay for it. I mean, how many people actually believe that? I think more than we think, but not as many as we think.
Well, among elected Republicans, probably a number close to zero.
Exactly. So, among the people running on the idea that we'll build a wall and Mexico will pay for it, none of them believe that was going to happen.
No, and it's the fact that they get away with saying these things, even after clearly the wall wasn't even built. Mexico was never going to pay for it. They're going to keep saying it. People blame Biden for spending money on Ukraine as opposed to the wall or the southern border, whatever. I mean, there's no integrity there, but because they get treated by many in the media as if they have a point, the Democrats have a point, and as well as anybody, it took the New York Times 3 years to call lies lies. So there is no incentive to stop. There is no incentive to try to cure themselves of the prion disease, and which is why we have 2 seditionist senators on the Judiciary Committee saying the most outrageous, despicable things about now, thankfully, Supreme Court Justice Jackson. And there's no pushback. I
think confronted. I think the people who cover politics every day, the elite political media, are being confronted with the fact that we only allow because of our system, the good grace of the founders, we only allow ourselves 2 political parties in this country.
Yeah.
One of our political parties is out of its mind.
Yes.
Has completely gone insane. Top to bottom, every level, from school boards to the Senate of the United States to the White House. That party has lost its mind. It is a danger to the entire system.
Yeah.
That's unthinkable and therefore unsayable, even though anybody with a minimum of perception understands that. That Marjorie Taylor Greene does not belong in the House of Representatives. Marsha Blackburn certainly does not belong in the United States Senate. They have nothing to offer, but there they are, because they were allowed to come up through the infrastructure of a party that's lost its mind. And if you think like things are bad now, wait till some of these state legislators get ambitious, who are passing the voter suppression laws, and they don't say gay laws and the complete anti-abortion laws. Wait till they start getting ambitious, because that's the farm team. That's the next generation of House Republicans.
That's right.
And God help us, because there's nobody in that party willing or able to change the course. I came to that revelation oddly enough, during the whole dust up over Terry Schiavo.
Oh, absolutely.
When the polls were just incredibly against the position taken by the Republican Party.
Charlie, can you just remind people, because it was quite a while ago, but it was, I agree with you, that was a turning point.
In a vegetative state in a hospice in Florida.
And who was governor?
Jeb Bush, thank you very much. And of course, George W. was president. And her husband, who had power of attorney, I'm doing this from memory now, wanted to discontinue life support.
There was absolutely no hope of recovery, by the way.
Absolutely
None.
not. Her brain had atrophied almost to invisibility.
Exactly.
As we found out later during the autopsy. But her parents didn't want to. So what started out as this incredibly ugly but understandable family feud, and God knows there are probably, 20 to 50 of them going on right now at hospices all over the country, turned into this political slanging match in which federal judges were having their lives threatened, and elementary schools down the block from the hospice were getting bomb threats. The husband had a $17,000 bounty placed on his head by some nut in North Carolina. People tried to sneak in to the hospice to give her water, even though she would have drowned. And perhaps maddest of all, the priest came in to give her last rites. A priest who is like the official priest of this hospice came in. The parents brought in another priest, and the two priests almost had a fist fight in the lobby of the hospice. And the person a wonderful woman named Annie Santa Maria, who was the patient, not patient advocate, but the patient ombudsman at this hospice, couldn't stop the fight between the two priests because she was getting in the mail a congressional subpoena for Terry Schiavo to come to Washington to testify. This got, and I've talked to Democratic members of Congress who were there at the time. Barney Frank was one of them, actually. And they told me, look, we went to the Republicans pushing this, and we said, stop, you're killing yourself. You're going right over the cliff with this issue. And they didn't stop.
Right.
And it did cost them in the 2006 midterms. Now, they lost everything in the 2006 midterms. It wasn't permanent, God knows, but it did happen. And at that point, I realized that the irrationality had gotten to the point where once one of those things starts, they can't stop themselves anymore. And your uncle's campaign was, I think, exhibit A in the last 5 years of that same thing. Mm-hmm. Once it got rolling, there was nobody in the party strong enough or willing enough to throw the brakes.
Right. Yeah, it was a test case in two ways. One, to see how much they could get the government to interfere in people's lives, which, by the way, they're not supposed to believe in because they're allegedly small government.
Small government conservatives. Yep.
And also attacking science, because there were medical doctors making these very difficult but accurate assessments of this woman. And I don't remember his name, but the senator who was also a medical doctor, looked at her.
Oh, that was Bill Frist from Tennessee. He was the majority leader.
That's right. And diagnosed this woman, via Zoom or something.
Yeah, and Sean Hannity had some crazy ass doctor who'd seen her for 5 minutes, named Hammersfar or something, on TV. I mean, people. I went there I did a chapter in Indian America about the hospice. That's how I knew I met Annie and all these other folks. This was after everything had died down. And of all the people who were there, the people in the hospice hated Sean Hannity more than anybody else, because he was the one who was accusing them of killing her. And you had, I mean, you and I both know, nobody does God's work more than hospice workers.
Absolutely.
I mean, it's just absolutely, you know, I mean, my father died of Alzheimer's. I mean, it's a thankless job, because it never comes to a good end.
Never.
And people who go back there day after day after day are automatically going to heaven. And these people would be, you know, we're talking about orderlies and cooks and, you know, recreation directors and nice old lady volunteers. They pull into the parking lot every day, and 1,500 people across the street would scream at them that they were Nazis. That was
Sounds
just
familiar.
crazy. Yeah, I mean, it was awful. It was just, I mean, apparently it was the worst experience of a lot of people's lives. People were followed to their homes, you know, with cars without their, you know, in the middle of the night in Florida and back roads with the people following them at not having their headlights on. I mean, it was very, very tough. And it was encouraged by people in elected office.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that was the time. I wasn't doing the blog at the time, but that was at the time I realized that the Republican Party had no air brakes anymore.
Mm-hmm.
That once they got rolling on something like this, if they thought there was a political advantage to it, they could not stop themselves.
Yeah, and that's undoubtedly when white evangelicals went all in on the Republican Party. And as we've seen time after time after time, the Republican Party, they don't create the monster necessarily, but they wrangle the monster, thinking they can control it and use it to increase their power. And then the monster takes over. So, you know, we saw that with the Tea Party, and it reached its, well, I don't know, nadir or peak zenith under the Trump administration.
Yeah, I mean, there are people, I think, for example, talking about, you know, being out of control of the monster, it's obvious to me now that Chief Justice John Roberts has lost control of his conservative majority.
Absolutely.
He doesn't have the votes to be, I mean, even if he wanted to be moderate, and I think there are only two issues he really cares about. One of them is destroying voting rights, and the other one is corporate,
that's right,
you know, corporate personhood. I think those two things are his North Stars. He's never going to agree with a decision that runs contrary to those two things. Exactly. Everything else, I think he's willing to listen. Mm-hmm. But I think right now, he's not driving the train. Alito and Clarence Thomas are driving the train. You saw that just last week in the Clean Air Act shadow docket decision, where they reinstated the Trump administration clean air rule on the shadow docket, and Roberts dissented.
Yeah.
He doesn't have the votes. Mitch McConnell doesn't have the votes to be a moderate, even if he wanted to be. And he doesn't want to be.
No, he doesn't want to be.
Kevin McCarthy can't be Speaker of the House without the crazy people.
And he never will be anyway.
I don't think he's going to be anyway. Exactly.
No, it's going to be somebody like Jim Jordan. But
it's going to be Jordan or Boebert or you know, Donald Trump. I mean, there's
right.
People,
that's right.
People talking, you know.
Floated. Because, you know, for those of you who don't know, you do not need to be a member of the House of Representatives in order to be Speaker of the House. That's so right. If one of the many, many, many reasons that Democrats need to keep their majority in the House is because it has been floated that if Republicans gain control, one of the things they'll do other than impeach Joe Biden every day is make Donald Speaker of the House.
Yeah, that you know, it's like you know, as all of us Catholics know, you don't have to be a priest to be Pope. Any Catholic can be Pope.
That's right.
That's how we wound up with all those Medicis. But anyway, yeah, I mean, it's even if there are cooler heads in the Republican Party, and I'm certainly not in the Congress. I'm not entirely sure there are, by the way. They have no power. Liz Cheney has no power. Adam Kinzinger has no power. He's a nice guy. I'm glad he's on the side of the angels in regards to January 6th. Neither one of them, by the way, voted to break up the voter suppression acts.
Nope.
They both voted against the voting rights bills. So, they're not giving up all the articles of faith.
No, they're right on one thing, basically.
Yeah,
It's an important thing.
But even if they were, they have no power. Liz Cheney's not going to be there next January. I don't think. I mean,
I'm not entirely sure.
Some backhammer from Wyoming.
Simply though, because it's Wyoming, it's Cheney territory. It may not matter, and but I think if she does lose, that is a sign of the end times. Because of Cheney losing in Wyoming,
Cheney is not enough. Kinzinger, I guess, has been redistricted into a race he doesn't want to make, which kind of disappoints me, actually.
And recently, and one of the other members of the House who voted for impeachment, he's not running again.
Yeah, I think these people, if they're defending the Republic, should run for re-election. I think Kinzinger should run for re-election.
I agree with you.
I mean, what do you care if you lose? People expect you to lose anyway.
But it's sort of like, why did four Republican senators who are retiring, first of all, and secondly, who know that Justice Jackson's elevation is historic. Also, she's eminently qualified, more qualified than anybody else in the Supreme Court right now. And it doesn't change the composition of the court at all.
I'm glad you said that, because I've been watching those four guys for a year now, ever since they all decided they weren't going to run for re-election. What do they care? What does Tom Tillis care what the Trump people think of him? I mean, is he really afraid that they're going to show up at his house one night with a carload of dynamite? I mean, they can do nothing to him. He's not running again.
I think it's not getting on the Fox News board or something.
Yeah, I mean, maybe, but I'm sure there's a right-wing think tank sinecure you can find.
Or CBS.
Yeah, or exactly. But Pat Toomey's another one.
Yep.
I mean, what do you have to lose? Vote for her. Vote to impeach the guy. I mean, why? What do you have to lose? What can he do to you? He's already lost the presidency. You're not running again anyway.
Right.
Go into your retirement with a clear conscience. Be able to, go to your vacation home and sleep at night.
It suggests they have a conscience, though, and that's the problem. I don't think, this fascinates me, and I wonder if it's a function of having gone with the flow and not stood up for things all along, or what. But it is extraordinary. 100%, well, 99% of elected Republicans in Congress stand for nothing, are perfectly willing to destroy American democracy so the Republicans stay in power. It's insane. They're willing to put up with the fascism of the Greens and the Jordans and the Gateses. Why is he not in prison? They're perfectly willing. They draw the line at somebody talking about cocaine-fueled sex orgies, but fascism is cool.
I draw the line at even imagining that. But go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, I shouldn't have even mentioned it. But
the image of Chuck Grassley in a thong.
Okay, it's a family friendly. It's actually not.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's not. Fuck it.
Sorry,
it's totally
kids.
Kids, stop watching. You should be watching. But these are people who, and I think this is one of the biggest problems we're facing right now, because the Democratic Party is suffering from the same kind of paralysis or inability to see what's happening right in front of them as the media. They see these Republicans, particularly in the Senate, maybe only in the Senate, as their colleagues, people who 10, 20 years ago, they could make deals with and go out and have drinks with. And it's making it impossible for them to see the reality on the ground, which is that this is a party of fascists, and every single one of them, 100% of Republicans vote against everything. Good.
Right. I admire the fact that they rammed through this nomination.
Yeah.
That they just didn't give a damn.
Yeah.
Mitch McConnell talking about politicizing the process. Please stop. You're embarrassing yourself. And they they managed to get half the infrastructure bill through. Why the president is shy about really doing something on student loans, I don't know. I can't figure that out at all. Because that's a winner in the fall, even if he were to forgive $50,000 of every student loan, which I think is Elizabeth Warren's fallback proposal now. That's I don't know how many million votes. Right now,
absolutely young votes.
37% of the electorate think we're losing jobs, and we have 3.6% unemployment. That's crazy. These people know that the neighbors who used to be who didn't used to have a job now. They're talking to their friends, over, croissants Sunday after church, and neighbor Ralph has a job again. So they know that that we're gaining jobs, not losing jobs. But have a pollster call them, and they'd rather believe in the haunted kingdom that they're being sold every night on TV from 7 till 11, and every day on their radio stations.
But that kind of brings us a full circle, because Eric's last post was about that very issue. Mm-hmm. Why can't the media seem to fairly represent the incredible accomplishments of this administration? And he went through some of the headlines that are all negative headlines about the economy, about job growth, none of which reflect reality. And he said, in order to get to a positive story, you had to scroll down through 87 other headlines.
Post, 87 different things to get to hey, we got 3.6 unemployment. I don't know. I know that we've raised a generation of political reporters whose formative experience in their political lives, even if they were only teenagers at the time, was the Clinton impeachment, which was a kabuki show. Mm-hmm. That was a fake, basically. It was, it was never going. It just wasn't going to happen, and everybody knew it. And Whitewater was a hoax, and that's been, the Clinton. Anyway, I don't want to get back into that, but their formative experience was being wrapped up in a scandal about nothing, really.
Right.
And their formative experience was growing up in a political climate and a political ecosystem in which labor had no power. So that, their economic views are colored by that. Mm-hmm. They're raised, they came up in an atmosphere in which inflation was the ultimate boogeyman. Mm-hmm. Paul Krugman beats his tin drum on this relentlessly, that inflation is not the boogeyman. And by the way, we didn't have it for a long time. Yeah. And even if we have it now, it's a relic of the pandemic, and things will calm down.
Right.
They were raised on the ruins of the Roosevelt coalition. The older ones, the first president they remember is Ronald Reagan. Right. The first political earthquake they remember is Newt Gingrich taking over the House of Representatives in 1994. This is the political ecosystem they were raised in, and history to a lot of these people is whatever came over their BlackBerry 20 minutes ago. They don't know, or they haven't informed themselves about the transformation the Republican Party undertook quite deliberately in the mid-1960s to early 1970s, where they became the party of the remnants of American apartheid, and then became the party of theocracy.
Yeah.
And now have become the party of, incipient fascism. Mm-hmm. That's a straight line. Okay.
Yes.
If you're at all aware and have read anything, what a straight line that is. I think we've lost a generation of political reporters. Number one, who didn't come out of the elite universities. In fact, some of them, some of the early ones that I knew, the older guys that I knew, didn't come out of university at all. They came out of, the University of World War II, basically. And we're talking about, a generation of political reporters, that generation of political reporters who all had jobs. I mean, they didn't go to Harvard and then, the Kennedy School and then to a Senate staff and then to the congressional staff of the Washington Post or Politico. They've been raised in this history-free ecosystem, this history-free bubble, and history doesn't sing to them the way it does to somebody my age or older. They don't hear the rhyme, to use Mark Twain's phrase. And I think, you're dealing at that point with the kind of detachment that makes anything plausible. If you don't see that straight line we talked about, then sure, it's an argument that won, therefore it's got some validity to it. No, it has no validity to it.
No, and it's a line that the Republicans are doing their level best to erase.
We're at war with history now. There's absolutely no doubt about it, and there's a reason for it.
Of course, there is.
It's to roll back everything, every progressive accomplishment, at least going back to the civil rights movement, and possibly going back to the beginning of the last century.
I would say 1860. But
I don't think they're going to reinstate slavery, although they might find a way to do it. And
I think I meant 1865.
They're really good at that.
I think we're going back to the end of Reconstruction is what they want. It is not an accident that in the last 2 weeks, one senator, Blunt, basically said that mixed race marriages
should be on the table.
Should be on the table.
Violation of states' rights.
And Marsha Blackburn said essentially the same thing about birth control.
About Griswold, yeah. And Griswold's not just birth control. Griswold's the right to privacy. Griswold
exactly, yes.
That's the holy grail, because then you can wiretap anybody you want. You can break into anybody's house. If that right doesn't exist, and it's not stated, specifically in the Constitution, then you've got all you need.
Yes.
If that right loses its legitimacy.
So there are so many reasons that the Republicans have to lose in November. So many. And yet it isn't getting across. And because I don't want to leave with people watching
hurling themselves off windows.
Yeah, jumping off of buildings and stuff. What do you, if you could give us a couple of things that you think can be the most effective and have the most impact, whether it's figuring out ways to get Democratic politicians to pay attention to the emergency, whether it's ways to get individual people to have faith and be motivated, because honestly, like if we say, well, it's over now, we're never going to win. Nobody's going to be motivated.
That's not an option.
It is not an option. We have
resignation is not an option.
That's a lot of time. It's not a lot of time in political time, but it is a lot of time in real time. We have 8 months. So what are the best ways for us to spend those 8 months?
Oh, I'm obviously organizing at every level of government, and understand that you're operating at a disadvantage. The voter suppression laws are going to be there. Okay, there's nothing they can do about it before November, because number one, you've lost your advantage on the Supreme Court. They're perfectly content to let anything stand at this point.
Or reverse things that were good. Alabama.
Or make things harder. Yep. I think if the Dobbs case breaks wrong in June or July or whenever the decision comes down, if Roe v. Wade is either de facto or de jure overruled,
Oh, it will be.
That could be, a very short fuse. That could screw up the, alleged cakewalk the Republicans have in the midterms. Because people will understand. I think a lot of people will understand that rights you win aren't permanent. I mean, Black people have known this for 20 years.
Exactly.
That the achievement of the civil rights movement were not permanent, that there were forces working to roll them back almost from the time they were passed.
Right.
You get a whole millions of white suburban women realizing that, and who knows what can happen.
Yeah.
But, I think organizing at the state and local level and basically confront the threat without being afraid of it. Understand what's going on. Understand the magnitude of the danger without being afraid of it. We have come through worse periods in our history before. We're not shooting at each other yet.
Right.
We're not marching armies through Virginia yet. It's possible for us to come back from the brink.
And this is not something that requires nuance. I had a conversation the other night in which David Rothkopf basically said that, the Republicans say something really blunt, even if it's a lie, and the Democrats respond with a 30-page white paper.
Yeah.
We don't need nuance. It's really this simple. Yeah. In November, you're voting for democracy, or you're not.
Exactly. And I do, I wish there was a Democratic/liberal media ecosystem to match the one on the right, but there isn't.
Yeah.
You and Stephanie and everybody, do yo person's work, but it's just not there. And it's going to have to be done. It's going to have to be done at the state level on the ground. Yeah. And the national party's got to understand that. The money has got to understand that. I hate the fact that we have to play by the same rules, that they do vis-a-vis Citizens United, but we do.
Yeah.
There's no point unilaterally disarming it.
Absolutely not.
It's a horrible decision. It has no basis in the Constitution. And it was delivered into the hands of David Bossie, who was a dirty tricks artist going back to Clinton. But that's neither here nor there. And later went to work for Donald's, administration. Mm-hmm. But excuse me. I'm going to need a little of this.
I hope that's beer.
It's no, it's not. It's Diet Pepsi. It's going to be a long haul because a lot of these interests are entrenched. And once you've fought your way all the way through the culture war issues and the nonsense issues and the space alien issues and everything that doesn't make sense to the logical mind, you've still got the corporate and you still got the money power. And that's still back there. And they really don't care if the country goes to hell, as long as they got theirs.
Right.
They'll find a way to survive. Fascism and corporations, the Krupps and IG Farben did pretty well. Mm-hmm. From 1939 to 1945. And that's the real power, because that's where the money is.
Right.
And we need, I think, Amy Klobuchar in her crusade for antitrust legislation. I think that absolutely should be a priority. We need to break the money power. We break the money power. We break the power of all the stuff that it feeds. Citizens against critical race theory in our schools, concerned parents. They don't survive without the Koch money or without the Bradley Foundation or the Olin Foundation.
Right. Exactly.
That's the fuel. That's the furnace. That's the power. And that's got to be broken. And if you can't break it through the courts, which apparently you can't now, you have to do it some other way. You either have to elect state legislatures who will do it on their own, and that'll get overturned by the Supreme Court when it gets there. But for a time, at least, they won't be able to do it.
Mhm.
And you've got to break up the monopoly economy in this country, and that you can do.
Yes, but for the rest of us, I agree. Focus, something Democrats have never been good at doing. Focus on local elections, school boards, state attorneys general, state secretaries of state. Secretary, right? Because that's, I mean, there are Republicans out there running who are.
There are crazy people running right now.
Their platform is, we will overturn the results of an election if a Democrat wins, even if it's legitimate.
Exactly. So we will decertify the last election.
Yeah.
As though that'll,
Yeah, it's incredible. So as I said, we have time. We really need to get people to stop feeling hopeless and get motivated.
That's not an option. That's why I get up every morning.
Exactly.
Because otherwise, I don't want to believe I'm shouting down a well.
No, we're not. Listen, I say this all the time, and it doesn't feel true a lot of the times, but it is true. There are more of us than there are of them, and what we're fighting for is what is worth fighting for.
Yeah, and on some issues, there are a lot more of us than there are of them.
That's right.
On pro-choice, there are a lot more of us than there are of them.
Yeah, so maybe they'll overplay their hand. I hate having it come down to that because a lot of people will suffer in the meantime. But if that's what it takes, then we need to capitalize on that.
Then it becomes the obligation of the other political party to continually explain to people why they're suffering.
That's right.
They're not suffering because of those of us who wanted to keep the status quo. They're suffering because of the extremists in the other party. Right. There are no moderate Republicans. They do not exist anymore.
And there are no conservative Republicans either.
Well, yeah, I mean, we're moving in that direction. I mean, I think there probably are conservative Republicans, but
in the House?
Well, no, not in the House.
No, I mean elected Republicans. I don't mean,
the House is.
I don't mean in general.
That's the reptile form. I mean, there's the Republican caucus in the House belongs in a room with very soft walls. It's just, I mean, believe me, I sat through the impeachment, the Judiciary Committee, impeachment hearings. I sat through the confirmation hearings for people like Ryan Zinke and Betsy DeVos. That was in the Senate, obviously, but in the House, that's out of control. I mean, that's.
And as far as I'm concerned, that should be enough incentive. But Charlie, I literally could keep you here all night, but you have to eat dinner.
I do have to eat my overcooked dinner. Yes.
Again, though,
we'll do it anytime. I enjoyed this a great deal.
I'm so grateful to you for your work, for your kind words about our friend Eric Boehlert, whom we will miss terribly.
Hey, it's up to us to carry on.
Absolutely. If we want to honor his legacy, then we need to pick up his torch and try our best to fill that unfillable void that he left. So, Charlie, thank you so much, and we will definitely do this again.
Okay. See you later.
You too. Stay safe. Okay, tonight I'm just going to touch on a couple of issues and just riff on them briefly. And I also have an announcement. First of all, it is with just immense joy that I can say we have a new Supreme Court justice, and her name is Ketanji Brown Jackson. It's impossible to put into words how meaningful this is. Even though it doesn't change the composition of the court, it certainly changes the tenor of the court. It changes the future of the court in a way that should make all of us proud and happy, honestly. All of that having been said, because I don't want to take away from the extraordinary achievements and brilliance of Justice Jackson, we can never, ever forget the despicable behavior of the Republicans on the Judiciary Committee. Again, two of whom are active seditionists. They were not just monumentally disrespectful to a woman who deserves nothing but respect. They were openly racist. A few days ago, Tom Cotton, who is arrogant and stupid enough to think that someday he's going to be president, claimed that Justice Jackson, if she had been a lawyer at the Nuremberg trials, would have been defending Nazis. This is a person who does not belong in polite company, let alone the American Senate. So every single Republican on the Judiciary Committee disgraced him or herself. And if they are in states where there's any hope at all of getting rid of them, we need to make sure that happens. And Cruz and Hawley should be tried for their crimes against this country. I also hear that Elon Musk bought a 9.2% share of Twitter, which gives him a controlling interest, which means we're all screwed. I honestly, I don't quite know what his plans are, although apparently he has big plans. I don't know if he would allow people who have been banned for life, like, I don't know, Donald, if he's going to let them back. But what I do know is that this is one of the many, many, many reasons that individuals should never be allowed to accumulate the kind of wealth Elon Musk has. It's dangerous. He should be paying enormous percentages of tax on his billions of dollars, forgive me, most of which he has accrued thanks in large part due to help from the federal government. So his role at Twitter aside, we're just going to see how that plays out. If nothing else, this just increases the urgency of changing the system so that individuals and corporations cannot acquire that kind of obscene wealth. Finally, Florida Don't Say Gay bill passed. It's obscene that this is happening in America in 2022. What's even worse is that the governor who allowed this to happen, who approved of this, has a very good shot of being the Republican nominee for president, if not in 2024, then perhaps in 2028. So we need to keep an eye not just on Florida and how that plays out, because again, this is dangerous. This is detrimental to LGBTQ youth, or anybody, honestly, whether you're parents of a child or a gay couple. It is demoralizing, but it is dangerous as well. It sets people up for being bullied. It creates situations in which people are more likely to become depressed and suicidal. And it's just going to spread throughout the country since it passed so easily in Florida, just as these anti-choice bills are starting to pass in states other than Texas. So all of that we need to pay attention to. And it should be real incentive for us to stay engaged and to keep fighting, because we do not want the future of this country to be written by people like Ted Cruz, Josh Hawley, Tom Cotton, Ron DeSantis, and Donald. As for the announcement, I just launched a political action committee called the Democracy Defense Fund. If you want to check out what it's all about, go to democracydefensefund.com. Our mission is threefold. It's to educate people about voter suppression and voter subversion, and to make sure Democrats hold the House and Senate and preferably increase their majorities in those two bodies, and stay laser focused on local and state level elections, especially those that will have electoral impact and those that are most flippable. So again, please check it out, democracydefensefund.com. We'd love to have you join, and I'll keep talking about it here and the work we're doing. So I would really appreciate it if you go to the website and see where we're up to. Okay, time for Q&A. I'm going to make it quick tonight. First up, from Robert in Canada. It's important to compare Vladimir Putin and his approach to governing with Donald Trump. They're both, in my opinion, dictators and should be portrayed as such. And the American people should have to decide whether they want a dictator or they want democracy. Why do we not hear more of this from candidates or the president? It's a really good question, and I agree with you. I mean, obviously Donald isn't a dictator; he's not in power right now, but that certainly is an ambition of his. And if he were to regain power, the Republican Party would be more than happy to help that happen. So I don't know why people pull their punches. I've said many times that we should not be asking the question, is Donald going to run? We should be asking the question, why should he be allowed to? Because framing questions properly helps people understand what's at stake. If you say, will he run? You're normalizing him and ignoring the fact that he's a criminal who betrayed his country. So we do need to hear more straightforward language like that. From Kristen in Carlisle, Pennsylvania, how much of an impact on voter turnout do you think all of the voter suppression laws being passed by Republicans will have? You know, that remains to be seen, certainly, but we need to prepare for the worst, by which I mean we need to assume that a lot of these voter suppression bills will become law and will affect turnout and the ability of a lot of people to vote in the 2022 midterms. We have to realize that we now have a rogue Supreme Court that is willing to allow extreme gerrymandering as long as it's done by Republicans. And we have to keep in mind what's happening in terms of voter subversion, which is why we need to be laser focused on races at the state level in which elections are run. So, you know, states, Secretary of States, attorneys general, depending on the state, we need to make sure that people in those positions are people who are dedicated to holding free and fair elections and abiding by the results. The bottom line, though, is we need, and I feel like we say this every single time, but it's increasingly true. We need to vote in such numbers that they just can't stop us. It's that simple. Okay, so that's it for tonight. If you have any questions, just email me at mary@politicon.com. And I will be more than happy to get to your questions if I have the opportunity. I love hearing from you guys and knowing what you're thinking. And in the meantime, I encourage you to go check out Eric Boehlert's press run. His work is still relevant. I've heard that family and friends are going to keep his project going, which is really good to hear. I'm not quite sure how that's going to work because his work is just so extraordinary. But I think it's necessary to make the attempt. So I believe it's just pressrun.com, or you could just go to substack.com and look for Press Run. So thank you so much. It's been a tough week, although there have been some bright spots. But I was so grateful to Charlie Pierce for joining me so we could talk about the extraordinary man who was Eric Boehlert. If you go to youtube.com/Politicon, you can follow the Politicon YouTube channel. That's really important. And also, there is a bell that you can click on the YouTube page. I always do the wrong side. There we go. A bell that you can click on the YouTube page. So that way you will get every single new episode as it drops. So please join us. Remember, there's a new weekly episode on Tuesdays called Strategy Sessions. Same time, 7:00 p.m. Eastern, 4:00 Pacific. So for now, we've got 2 shows a week, Tuesdays, Thursdays. That's youtube.com/Politicon. And it is always great to have you here. Don't forget, you can also listen to the podcast form of the show. So just go to Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen. Thank you again for being here. I so appreciate it. And we will see you on Tuesday. Have a great weekend and stay safe.
Thank you.